Happy day. Welcome to M.O.P classroom. Today we'll be looking into the nuances of reporting for television, basic camera shots and news presentation techniques. Before we begin, we should also know why the visual medium is the most important while conveying the news to the audience. Like Marshall McLuhan says, medium is the message. The emphasis on the medium is very important when it comes to any storytelling technique, especially when it comes to the television news presentation. The medium video has its own meaning in delivering the story to the audience, as in when compared to the print, it is only the words which will speak more, but in case of broadcast, or in other words television specifically, visuals also make equal relevance to the storytelling technique. With that, we will look into what exactly we need to concentrate upon while reporting for television. In this slide, as you are able to see, there should be an equal balance between the visuals as well as the words. People tend to think that because it is TV news, more emphasis should be given on the visuals. But actually, even the words, the usage of jargons should be cut down, thereby striking an equal balance between the visual as well as the words. Here, as television news reporters or journalists, we are not going to concentrate upon the aesthetics of the visuals. Therein, we will be able to communicate with simple news presentation techniques that we will look into in today's class. Now, we should also know what makes a news worthy when it comes to television broadcast. Here, I have consciously placed all the key characteristics of newsworthiness pertaining to the television medium. Starting with timeliness, all of us will agree to the fact that the news that comes on the television news channels are attending to the characteristic timeliness to the maximum, because in print media we do have time taken in order to edit and submit a very error-free report on the print media. But when it comes to television, it is the breaking news that takes more prominence than anything else. That is why timeliness is given more weightage when it comes to television news presentation, followed by proximity, impact, and then the rarity, conflict, human interest, and the last is the prominence. In this list, though the prominence is placed at the bottom, it also plays an equally important role when it comes to newsworthiness. As basics of journalism, we also know that there are 5 W's and 1 H that we need to attend to, or we need to address in order to cover any news story. Likewise, for television news presentation, we should look into the 5 W's mainly and then get into 1 H. And those 5 W's are who, what, where, when, and why. So, any event or any news that the news journalist tries to cover should attend to all these 5 W's in order to quickly send the update to the audience. Now, these are the 3 brief phases of production when it comes to news, that is pre-production, production, and post-production. When it comes to news production for television channels especially, we start with pre-production, where sometimes journalists get the time to plan their event when it is an informed event. But when it comes to breaking news, when it comes to any calamities, for example, in that case there is no much time to frame the story or get into the nuances of scripting. In that case, it becomes very challenging for the journalist as well as for the videographer to cover calamities or any instant news. When we get into the pre-production stage, like mentioned here, script and preparing storyboards are very important part of pre-production. But when we travel to the production phase, for news broadcasting, shooting and recording is a key step when it comes to the production. When we talk about the post-production, editing matters a lot because today's news channels have got various interesting ways of presenting news to the audience rather than having the same old format of presenting news to the audience. This is the common story structure when it comes to television news, where we start from the climax, then go to the cause and arrive at the effect. In print media, it is quite a different format, but here this is the actual format that any video journalist should follow while addressing their audience. While covering any event, this is especially for the videography section. So, any videographer should follow the rule of thirds where the key intersection points are highlighted here. Sometimes it gets very challenging for the videographer to follow rule of thirds always, but it is essential for any videographer to follow rule of thirds. We will look into what rule of thirds is all about. There is an emphasis on these intersection points, that is you can see that the intersection points are circled. This is the eye movement of the audience. It's the basic human psychology of viewing a frame or viewing a particular channel. Your eye starts from the top left corner, travels to the bottom left, then again travels to the top right and descends down to bottom right. So, this is how the importance of news presentation will happen. The format that any news television channel follows could be in this format in order to gain more prominence among their audiences. When shooting a video especially, I think the photograph can also be included in this, but specifically when we are shooting a video, we should not always center the horizon on your screen. We should either place it either on the top or the bottom of the screen in order to gain prominence. It's not that whatever is displayed on the screen, the audience will look into and get the same news story that the journalists try to convey. Sometimes the news channels also try out new news presentation formats in order to capture the audience concentration. The example that I have brought in, if you are planning to shoot a sailboat in an ocean, you should first plan your shot, whether are you going to concentrate on the sailboat or the ocean or the sky. So, accordingly you can frame your shot, and then we can go into the storytelling technique. But we should also get into the why question of rule of thirds. Why should we follow rule of thirds always? Here is the answer. Debunking the myth of central composition. We as audience always think that whatever is centrally framed captures the most of the attention, but it's always not right. Sometimes look at the image that I have brought in for today's class. Here the central composition is nothing, just the sky, but there is a storytelling process that happens in this photograph where the tree without any leaves, maybe one or two birds are seen in this image, but look at the framing technique which has crossed the central composition rule. But here the meaning that can be arrived probably is it's a shot from a deserted area where there is absolutely no possibility of livelihood. The meaning that I can probably decode from this particular photograph is that where central composition is not always to be followed. Sometimes when you place the objects on either the right extreme or the left extreme, it does make a huge impact. In continuation, This is another picture where the central composition is not given main weightage. Look at the melting glaciers at the background and the animal that's staring at the melting glaciers. This conveys the importance of climate change to us, isn't it? I feel that this is more prominent only when the central composition is not followed always. But we should also know that we shouldn't underestimate the central composition. Look at this image. The prominence of central composition is at the maximum with regard to this photograph, where the mountain, the snow-capped mountain is framed in such a way that the central composition is maintained. Now let's get into some basic camera shots and movements. Yes, these are some basic camera shots which goes automatically explained. That is extreme long shot, full shot, medium shot and medium close-up, ending with close-up shot. These are the usual camera shots followed by any videographer or video journalist when they cover an event or a news for their news channel. This is an interesting camera shot which is followed exclusively by the news channels alone. When you look into any entertainment channels, the over the shoulder shot that you can see on the screen now is not used as much as the news channels as such. Here the emphasis on the over the shoulder shot is that especially during an interview, one-to-one interview, this is used to the maximum. That is, the camera is placed just behind the person's shoulder. Likewise, in an interview, the presence of interviewee and interviewer, both of them will have over the shoulder shot just to capture their expression while questioning or while answering. So, this is an interesting camera shot exclusively available for video journalists. Now let's look into some basic camera movements which will be helpful for us in television news capturing. Starting with pan shot. Pan shot is a shot which travels either from left to right or right to left. Usually it is from left to right. This is just to emphasize on the location. So, in order to establish a location or an area in similar to a bird's eye view, we use a pan shot. In this video, we will be seeing the panning of the camera from left to right to emphasize on the usage of solar panels in a particular place. So, that's the pan shot for you. Next is the tilt shot. Tilt shot is also similar to pan shot, but the only difference is that when the tilt shot is done or is taken over by the video journalist, the camera travels from bottom to top or top to bottom. Both of it are called as tilt shots. Mainly tilt shots are used to emphasize on the tallness of the buildings or intricacies of a particular monument, etc. So, in this video that I have brought in for the class, the tilt shot starts from the bottom and travels to the top, emphasizing on the ecology of the nature. Now, some framing techniques. To begin with, single shot is the framing technique that will be commonly seen when you know that the subject is going to be static, is going to be intact. For example, in the example that I have brought in, we know that Prime Minister Modi is addressing a gathering and the frame is not going to move from one subject to the other. Especially if we could recall Prime Minister's address during the lockdowns, those are the instances where single shots were used to the max, where the framing is freezed, like the screen is freezed by the videographer. we can just mount our camera on the tripod and leave it as it is, because the subject is not going to move from one place to the other. Again, I am recalling the over the shoulder shot as a framing technique also. Sometimes the editors use over the shoulder shot in the case of framing technique also. Now let us get into news presentation techniques, some brief basic news presentation techniques. To begin with, this is the new nose room technique, where to explain you what nose room is, it is the space between the subject's nose and the edge of the frame. So look into the picture, the screenshot that I have brought in for today's class. The nose room here has its own emphasis on the meaning making process, as in you can also guess what probably the news story is all about, because there is no headline which is seen in this screenshot, but you can also guess what the news is all about. Probably I am guessing that this news is about the poor waste disposal in a particular area, or it is about badly laid roads about which the citizen of that particular locality is reporting or is sharing her opinion about the same. Here why the emphasis on nose room is that the background also talks or communicates along with what the subject shares about. So now if this is about the poor waste disposal, we can also see parallelly when the subject is that is the person sharing her opinion about, we can also see how really the waste disposal is poor in that particular area. Again, in the name of maintaining a good nose room space, that does not mean that we lack the clarity over the meaning making process. Look at this image. This is a poorly framed nose room space, because being it a race, an athletic race, the audience will be more curious to know if this person, this athlete, the child is going to win or is in the last of the track. So if this is the newsroom that we follow for track events, especially for sports, it would not be the ideal shot to be used. So in that case, we should think of a moving camera movement in order to make the best meaning out of it. This is another presentation technique of headroom, where as the term says, it is the space between the subject's head and the edge of the frame. In this particular image that I have brought in for today's class, look at the headroom space of the news presenter and the top edge of the frame. It is a well maintained headroom space where it is equally divided. This can be easily remembered for you as budding journalists. An easy quick tip is that when using rule of thirds, we need to place the character's eye on the top third so that we maintain the right headroom space. So here the videographer or the cameraman has rightly framed, maintaining the right headroom space. Another tip that you can probably take away is that you can also think of leaving one finger width at the top of the subject's head. Sometimes it becomes difficult to always remember these tips, but eventually by practice you can get there. This is another example, right example for both headroom as well as nose room, where the journalist probably is reporting from a COVID camp, explaining about the government measures that's been taken there, where both nose room and headroom is maintained. This is just to summarize about the nose room and head room. Now, just a summary of today's class. We started off with the emphasis on the audiovisual medium, as medium is the message, the quote by Marshall McLuhan, and we also saw the elements of the newsworthiness of television news stories. Then we went on to the various camera shots and camera movements. Then we also saw the news presentation techniques when it comes to broadcast news channels, and we also looked into some of the framing techniques which will be very helpful for video journalists. Thank you.